My guest today is Jen Brady, Executive Director of Oasis, a nonprofit helping women, teens, and children rise out of poverty in the greater Paterson, New Jersey area. We last spoke in May of 2020 on COVID's potential impact on the poor. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
First question. So who are the hardest people for you to help with your programs and why?
Yeah, so Oasis serves women and children living in poverty. The children are much easier to help, mostly because they don't have other obligations, right? The children want to be here. This is a warm, happy, nurturing place for them to be. But women living in poverty have lots of things pulling on them in every direction. So they might have a job that they can't leave to come to class. They might not have bus fare to get to the program. They might have a sick child or a child whose class has been sent home for a week or two due to COVID. So getting the women here consistently on a regular basis in our classrooms is the biggest challenge, and it's quite hard to overcome. We try to overcome it by providing for as many of those basic needs as we can, but if you're a mom of 3 kids and you don't know what you have no food in your cabinet to serve for dinner, your priority is not going to be on coming to class to get your GED. Your priority is going to be hitting the street and figuring out how you're going to get some food on your table.
And amongst kind of that demographic group of moms, young moms, I guess, is there kind of a subgroup there that's even harder still? Like, is there something other than that circumstance which can make the hill even steeper?
Yeah, I would say the women who come to us to get their high school equivalency degree is probably an even further challenged group. The typical profile of a woman who's coming to us to earn her GED is typically 36 years old, single mom, dropped out of high school at 16 years old, so she's been out of any kind of educational institution for an average of 20 years. Having that woman believe that she can actually earn her GED and want to be in a classroom is enormously challenging, and the smallest factor can throw her off and throw her confidence off. That we always say if a woman gets out of bed in the morning and gets on the bus and gets to Oasis, she deserves a star for the day. We should stand up and applaud her because the challenges are so great. But then if you don't feel good about being here, if you're not being successful in your studies, if you're not understanding your pre-algebra class here, which I don't think that I could understand at 56 years old, it's one more reason why you're not going to want to get out of bed and come.
Where do you think that comes from, that insecurity? Like, what if you could maybe, I know there's going to be a lot of diversity in the people who are here, but is there a way of sketching out a backstory that, if you could, for some of these people that might kind of tell what, because you have a lot of people from other countries and they have people who are not from other countries. Is one of those two groups more representative in that profile, or why is it so hard? What has hurt them, damaged them to make that so hard?
Yeah, I think the women who've grown up in generational poverty, they're not the families who've new immigrants here,
right,
who are here and they're scrappy and they really want to work and they really want to create a brighter life for their families. But the women who've grown up in generational poverty quite often have spent their lifetime being told they're not good.
Right.
They're not going to be successful in anything. So why are they even trying?
Yep.
And so to work with those women, and this is where we bring in the social workers and the social work component of our programming here, to get those women to believe that we believe in them and we believe they can do it. That's what changes the tide.
And you're fighting against something there, right? You're fighting against the culture that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's got to be pretty tough.
It can be daunting
because they're going to go back
exactly
every day,
mm-hmm.
and you're going to have a countervailing influence on them. Jen, what do you do about that?
Our job is to build them up so much that they become resilient to that, right? To believe so much that they can earn their high school degree, that they could go on to college if they choose, or a trade, that they can get a job, that they can create something, whatever it is that they imagine. That's our job. And that's what Oasis actually does quite beautifully when a woman wants it.
Mm-hmm. Is there something that, have you encountered amongst organizations that sort of share your mission, right? There are others out there, that you have a special insight into how to crack that? Is it in the structure that you mainly or only serve women and children here? Is there some other thing that gives you a special I don't want to say advantage. That's not the right way of thinking about it, but you know what I mean, right? Like makes your efforts here a little more effective maybe than they might see somewhere else.
So I would say serving only women and children is certainly an advantage in creating an atmosphere that's supportive and nurturing. Right. But the thing that sets Oasis apart, and we say this over and over and over again, is we love our women and children. We love them like their family. And once a woman understands that we are invested in their futures and we want them to succeed and we will stop at nothing to help them, that's what sets Oasis apart. And I do think that once a woman is here and she's meeting with our social workers regularly and she's in the classrooms where their teachers become like a family member to them, and they know that my door is open and that Evelyn, our student services manager, is going to ask them every day about their children and their mother and their brother who's still in Peru, then those women really feel like they're part of something and that they have a support network that possibly they've never had before. That's when we can see them succeed.
What if for a woman that's come in and, as we're saying, goes home to this broken culture, right? And let's say the bad thing happens, they drop out or they stop coming. Do they reappear again later? What's sort of the story that how does that play out?
It happens all the day. We have an ongoing conversation about attendance issues here, right? Okay. Because this happens. Women drop out. They don't feel good. They lose steam. Something happens in their life. Somebody beats them up. They lose their housing, so now they're couch surfing in another part of the city. We don't have a policy that says, you were gone for 3 months, you can't come back. You can always come back to Oasis. And eventually, the women will be ready to stay. But it's a dominant issue for our work here.
What would you say would be like the percentage of people, first timers that come in that will have this kind of, ups and downs, they'll drop out and they'll return? Like how many people wind up having that pattern of engagement for you think?
Nearly 100%.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow.
It's very unusual for us to have a woman come in and say, I want to get my GED, and show up every day and get it. It happens. Yeah. It definitely happens. And those are the women who are successful, right? And our teachers say it all the time. The number of days that you sit in that seat in my classroom is that you're that much closer to getting your GED, but it's a very high percentage.
So how do you protect the culture here against some cynicism about that, right? Because somebody new walks in the door. I mean, you could imagine an eye roll, like, here comes another one. I know what's going to happen to you, right? And I think of like and I mentioned to you before we started talking about the insurance industry, right? And one of the things that's about the insurance industry is you wind up being very focused on the people who abuse the system, right? Because they're the ones who will, and I had this experience personally where somebody will buy an insurance policy, claim the next day, and then cancel it. Right. And then now, they pay the insurance company $1,000 and they get $1 million or something, some fraud racket. Right. And so the culture of the insurance industry is it's almost like a callus. Right. And callus is a good metaphor there because they become distanced from their social mission, which is to really help people. But they're so focused on the bad actors that they get kind of cynical. And I have a cousin, another confession, who's a police officer. Same thing, right? I mean, they live in the world of the dirty and the bad, and they also get very cynical. And so how do you protect yourself against some of that?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work at educating and re-educating all of us here at Oasis who work here, and including our volunteers, on understanding what it's like to live in poverty. So most recently, we've brought in some people to do ACEs training. ACEs, if you're not familiar with it, are advanced childhood experiences. Okay. And there's actually a study, an Office of Resiliency now in the state of New Jersey that's very focused on making this a priority for our state. If a woman has grown up, if a child grows up in poverty and has advanced childhood experiences, there's actually a rating scale of them, and based on the number of ratings that you have, you are so much more likely to remain in poverty because your brain actually changes, right? You become wired to experience trauma. You become wired to, for your survival mechanisms to click in. And it prevents you from learning the way that other children might learn, and it prevents you from making decisions the way that other people make decisions. So making sure that our staff have an understanding of why women might drop out, of what's been happening in their world, right? And making sure that we're quite empathetic to those stories is critical, because it can be quite depressing for some of our staff, especially our teachers who are having low attendance rates, especially this time of year in February, March. A snowstorm, if you've got to walk 12 city blocks with 2 kids in a stroller and the bus isn't running and there's slush, and you're going to be much less apt to get out of your apartment and get your butt in the seat in your classroom than if it's a beautiful sunny day. So, we're very cognizant of what might prevent a woman from showing up, from continuing with her education, but it's a constant source of conversation.
Do you measure that, the ACE score? Do you actually administer a survey of some kind to people?
We haven't administered a survey amongst our. We've done it with select staff here. We haven't done it with our student population.
Okay, and so the idea there is, you're pretty safe assumption a lot of the folks here would score fairly high, right? And then so you're saying to your staff, this is what happened, and I guess as a result of educating themselves on it, they can become more empathetic.
Understanding. And we also, we have policies in place that, support our women. If you need to take a pause from our GED program, we will let you take a pause, and we will actually commend you for saying, what, I need a break for a couple of weeks. My child is in the hospital. I'll come back in 3 weeks, and our social workers will check up on them to make sure they're okay, make sure they're on target to come back. But it's okay. There's no shame in saying, I can't come for a little while. Where in your traditional program, you're either in or you're out.
Right.
Like here, it's okay to take a pause.
Right. And I would guess that slows the whole process down. I mean, not just the pause, because there's then the reload, I suppose, right? So what would you say is what's like the standard time to get a GED, and how long would it take somebody here on average?
Yeah, it's impossible for me to give you an answer to that, because we also don't cut anyone off from coming into our program.
Okay.
So you take a test when you arrive here to get your GED,
Yep.
and you test in at a certain grade level.
Yep.
So we've had women who've tested in at 5th grade who've gotten their GED in 2 years.
Okay.
So that woman in particular, she showed up almost every day. She studied at night in the laundromat. She had 2 kids. She was going to show her kids that she could do it. So she went from 5th grade to 12th grade in 2 years.
Wow.
Other women who don't have the same level of determination, or who have many other obstacles in their way, could take them 10 or 12 years. It just depends on the circumstances.
Do you have access or partner with other institutions that might kind of get closer, or let's say provide influence in a different way, because they show up here and now they're in the world that you can control, right? And as you mentioned, you're going to build them, but then they go back to this other world. Like, do you have any access, or can you supply any resources to the other world? Are there other organizations, or it's the police for that matter, right? I mean, what else can you do to help them?
Yeah, the one of the greatest issues that our women face here is safe, affordable housing.
Sure.
So many of our women are couch surfing. They're living in illegal apartments and garages even. So that's something that we've dug pretty deep into, and we have partnered with 2 other organizations, Eva's Village and Kumak, to start a small supportive housing program. It's 6 units, and we've got 6 single moms living in those units. They all are working with a case manager, having the support that they need. They're paying very little fee per month. They don't pay rent per se. They pay a program participation fee. They've got a savings plan. 2 of the women in the 1 year that we've held that program have moved out to a place of choice, is the way that we term it.
Yep.
Because you and I might have a choice of where we live, but so many of our women don't. They're picking a place out of desperation, and so we're working with some other groups in the city to try and create larger scale supportive housing programs for mothers and children, and even for families. But that's really where we need to do the most work in this city.
What sort of controls do you place on that environment? Because I imagine if you left it alone, it would just turn into the world that they came from, that you're trying to protect them from, right? So how do you stop that?
I think you have to create it from the inside, and you have to let the moms create it. So all of those moms have full understanding that we're trying to create a supportive environment amongst the moms.
Yeah.
We're not top heavy. We're not coming in and telling you what to do, but we will support you in the choices that you collectively make. So if the group decides that they want to do a potluck dinner, or an art therapy program, they're deciding, they're making those decisions, they're co-creating the program with us, and that's what's going to make it successful, because no single mom wants to be told you have to be in your bed by 10 o'clock.
Sure.
You must attend 18 workshops
Right.
a year, right?
Living in a convent.
But if you're working with one of the Oasis social workers or one of the social workers from one of the other organizations, and you identify what the needs are, and you work with your team, your other moms, to come up with, I'm struggling with this too. How could we tackle this as a group? You're going to find that that's what's going to work.
The thing that I kind of think about there that would concern me is let's call it sources of destructive cultural influence. The ex-boyfriend is a drug dealer, whatever, right? I mean, how do you stop that from intruding in this safe space?
It's been difficult.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. It's certainly been a challenge. And while Oasis has never gone into housing before, even dipping our toe in it in this manner has been eye-opening for us.
Yeah.
But working very consistently with those moms to make them understand that what's a toxic relationship, what do you deserve, what do you want for your children, constantly bringing it from the inside out instead of from the outside in. That's been our approach, and for the most part, it's worked.
Yeah, and of course the consequences aren't just for the woman who has the, dirtbag, influence.
It's the whole community,
right? It's the one,
Yeah.
the roommate.
It can poison the whole community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really can mess the whole thing up. How do you I'm just wondering, like, how would you actually stop a problem that you see? Like, can you give me an example, maybe? No names, of course.
Yeah. No, we've had some issues over at the house, and we've sent our staff over there to deal with it. And we've actually most recently had one of our social workers actually move into the house as a house mom.
I see. Right.
So that there's somebody living in the house, so that when an issue comes up, you don't have to wait till the next morning to call Oasis or to call one of the other partner organizations, and then we've got to have a meeting, and it becomes very bureaucratic, and that's not the intent. The intent is to have the women solve their own problems,
Right.
And solve them collectively when that's necessary. So having one of our social workers living on site has been a game changer there.
That's a super interesting tension between kind of the let's call it autonomy and bureaucracy. Where else does that pop up for you? Is that something you think about a lot?
I think in any organization and in any line of work, you realize success when people can make their own choices and can generate the solutions themselves. So it is something we try to encourage here at Oasis. Yeah.
Right. As opposed to having groups of people get together, because it always seems to me that here's how I experience this tension, where if you have people who are all really good individually at some function, right? So you have a teacher, or you have maybe, I don't know, a cook or a security person or something, right? So they really know what they're doing in that world. They kind of have to work together for everything to work. And so suddenly now you have a committee, right? You didn't expect it. You didn't want it, really. But these people have to be on the same page. They have to be aligned with what they're all doing and communicate. And that necessarily slows it down. But the trade you get is you get individuals that are a little bit better at what they do because they're specializing in something. Does that sound familiar to you, this problem?
I think what you're getting at is, are we working to solve problems collectively here, right? Yeah. And while you were making that descriptive question, I was thinking about a big problem that we faced about 6 years ago here. You'll remember when immigration became a big issue all over our cities, and people weren't coming to class anymore. They were staying home in their apartments. They weren't coming in for class. They weren't even coming in for lunch. They were coming and getting groceries and going back home because there was so much fear in this community. Whether people were documented or undocumented, they might have a family member who's undocumented, or a friend who's undocumented in the apartment next door. So they didn't want to risk ICE coming into their home. So first of all, we had to educate ourselves enormously here on what's our rights and responsibilities,
Sure.
to our moms and to the law. But we took a different approach. When our ESL teachers actually went to the women and said, what's keeping you from coming here, and how can we help? And what we realized there were dozens and dozens of women in our programs that were undocumented but had a pathway to citizenship, but it was scary for them to pursue, or they didn't know how to pursue it, or they perceived it as being unattainable because of the financial obligation that they would have to make. So our team got together here. We're like, how can we solve this problem? There's, nobody's coming up to the, to your program. Nobody's coming to my program. How can we solve this? So we've created a citizenship program here, and we help the women learn the 100 questions that they need to know, practice for the interview. We help them complete the application. We get their fees waived, and we've had over 70 women become citizens since the inception of the program. But it was really like a grassroots. This is the issue. It's affecting our organization across every aspect of it. How can we solve it? And that was the approach that we took, and it grew out of what the needs of the community were.
Was there any basis in their fear? Like, was there a risk to them coming here at that time?
There was a risk of being anywhere if you were undocumented.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there were reports of ICE being on the corner, and absolutely.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And people were afraid that even if they came to Oasis, could ICE come into the classroom and grab them? But there were reports of people being picked up on the streets. Absolutely.
So they would have plainclothes ICE officers who would just ask you for your documentation?
They would knock on the door. Yeah.
Whoa. I did not know that. And you mentioned before we started that there are 26 countries?
Our women come from 26 different countries currently, yeah.
Represented here. That's a very big number.
Yeah. So our ESL program isn't like Spanish to English. It's English immersion, because we have certainly a lot of women come from South American countries, but a lot of women are coming from Middle Eastern countries as well. So we accept everyone.
Yeah, of course. How are they influenced differently? So what I'm getting at here is people respond to different folks, and one of the main things I see of what you're doing here is a kind of cultural conversion, right? So you're trying to get their head straight about kind of how they can lead a fulfilling life, and you have to talk them into it, right? And sometimes you don't respond. Everybody doesn't respond to the same sort of stimulus, I guess, or advocacy. Is there? Maybe I can phrase the question more generally, like, what are the different ways in which you try and do that? Is it different countries have different kind of priorities there, or is there some other dimension in which you kind of think about how to influence people?
We really try to celebrate all cultures here, so and bring them together so that there's an understanding, because the danger is that women from one culture wouldn't get along with women from another culture, right? Or would respond differently. So instead of treating everyone differently and taking that approach, we really try to integrate everyone. So pre-COVID, we were doing something called cultural meal days, and a group of our students from the community would go into our soup kitchen, and they would cook the meal for the day, and they would share the stories of what this meal meant in their homeland. And we might have some Syrian refugees one week, and the next week we might have a group of women from Peru or a group of women from Dominican Republic kind of sharing their meals. So in that way, we kind of envisioned, like a little model UN going on here, where, people really had an opportunity to cross ethnic boundaries and become very empathetic and understanding of people's different cultures.
Do you have a sense for I imagine the composition of, at least the national composition of the people here is changing over time, shifting depending on things that are happening in the world, right? And I'm wondering about how or if you can develop a sense of progress for the organization itself. It must seem like you're just kind of rolling a rock up the hill and back down it goes, right? Sort of this infinite need for what you do. Is that how you feel? Does it feel like you're sort of against the darkness, or do you feel like there's something greater that's being achieved and you're making progress to sort of some bigger goal?
Yeah, I mean, some days we certainly do feel like that. I'm not going to lie, but where we find the most hope and where we see a lot of movement is really with the children.
Yep, right.
So, it wasn't that long ago that, we had your average after school program and we had 120 kids in it. And they came here after school, they had a hot meal, they went up, they did their homework with some high school kids that we hired locally, and it was, a nice, safe place for them to be after school. But we had recognized, that we had kids in fifth grade who didn't know how to read. Wow. And we had kids in second grade who were functioning at a kindergarten level. So we had a very generous donor who invested in a long-term commitment to have us hire certified teachers and actually embed them in each of the classrooms. So today, grades K through 7 have a teacher in their classroom who knows their work, knows what they're struggling with, can assign tutors to them who are also highly trained, have an assistant teacher in the classroom. We've got a full-time math tutor and a reading specialist on staff to help those kids. So we're addressing those kids' educational gaps in a way I don't think anybody is, especially post-COVID. It's always shocking to people when I tell them that our kids in Patterson left their classroom on March 17th of 2020 and didn't go back into the classroom till September of 2021. So a year and 3 months of instruction was essentially lost because my kids are older, but if they had been little when COVID hit, they would have each had their own bedroom with their own safe space to work and their own laptop. But we were Zooming with our kids. We still ran our after school program throughout COVID, albeit remotely for the most part. And there'd be 4 kids on a bed with one laptop that we might have given them if they hadn't gotten one from the district. All trying to do their work on one little bed. It just wasn't conducive to learning. So today we measure our kids academically independently here. So we know that all of the kids in our after school program are at least one grade level behind as of December of 2021. So we're bringing in extra resources. We've got a Saturday program now with extra reading specialists and bilingual instructors to try and get them up to speed, because if they don't get up to speed, it'll affect them for the rest of their lives. But that is where we see the most movement with the children.
Yeah. I imagine, is there a world where some kids would come back as adults? Like, do you lose them? Is that something that's ever happened?
I don't think that's ever happened, although we've had some of our kids come back and work with us as adults.
Yeah.
That has happened.
Yeah.
But have they come back? No. And I have to say, the kids who are lucky enough to find Oasis and come into our program go through our after school program through 7th grade, go into our teen program where they have access to a teen guidance consultant. And even if those kids aren't going on to college, they have the ability to apply to trade schools. We have scholarship programs here. Like we can take that kid from the nurturing center when they're, babies and infants and get them all the way through to where they are, successful, adults.
And I like that idea of measuring their grade level. So as you're one behind, that's obviously not great, but maybe that's better than it was. Does the average of that change? Like, I would say when you first started the program, they probably were more than one grade level behind on average. Is that true? Or
we had great traction before COVID, but yeah. COVID really threw a wrench into it. So we had 3 years under our belt of running this program, and we could see progress every year. And our kids the majority of them were at least on grade level, if not above grade level. Pre-COVID, but spending, almost a year and a half of, not going into the classroom has affected every single one of our kids.
One of the things that I think is probably hard for me to at least appreciate, having never lived in a community like this in Patterson, is what the context is like. Because you can kind of go, I would imagine for somebody in my position, or at least in my own mind, I go one of two ways. Either I don't think about it, right? In which case it could be anything. Or I overdo the negative, honestly. Like, oh, it's like Baghdad, or, I drive through the town, which I did, which, I haven't done that many times, but, it's a beautiful day today. And so everything looks nice on a beautiful day, but it's still a town. It's still here, right? It's not going to be a war zone. It's going to be, for the United States, pretty rough place, right? But maybe help me understand, like, the real context. Like, how many kids have it okay, and they're helpable pretty easily. But there's going to be the subset, of course, that have it very much not okay. How many people come through on one of those two camps?
So, a lot of it has to do with your family dynamic and your family structure.
Yeah.
We've had kids find us later in life who have had a mom who's a drug addict and a dad they've never met, and they've kind of been on their own the whole time, right? And those kids aren't coming to our after-school program because the parent needs to make a choice to get them into our after-school program.
Right.
So they're not the ones that are finding us. The ones that are finding us as young children are more often than not come from a loving family and parents who are hardworking and maybe carrying 2 or 3 jobs each just to make sure that their kids have a better life. And those moms, I know them. I love them. They want the same thing for their kids that I wanted for my kids. They want them to be safe and secure. But there's definitely that population in the city here of kids who see a lot of violence, see a lot of anger, see a lot of crime, and don't feel safe.
So for the families that come here who have brought their kids and they work a lot, right? I must think that when we spoke last, you were mentioning to me that is actually the lockdowns were devastating for that group because they had a lot of the jobs that got locked out. I mean, I sat in my bedroom with a laptop and talked to people all day. Yeah. That's my job. It's ridiculous, but that's what my job is. They have to get out and they interact. They're in the real world. How did it go?
Yeah, so a lot of them lost their jobs initially because if you were the dishwasher in the restaurant wasn't open anymore. So that was devastating on one level, right? Then as the world reopened, we had a whole nother dynamic happening, and that was of children being left home because there was nobody to be home with them. Because if mom stayed home, she wasn't going to bring home a paycheck, and she'd probably be fired. It was interesting. Right after the holidays this year, in January, Patterson decided to stay closed for 3 more weeks. We have a program that's embedded in public school number 2, and part of our staff's responsibilities over there is checking in on students who aren't showing up for class and why is Jose absent so much or Susie, and so she was doing that. Even though the classes were remote for 3 weeks, the teachers would say, Susie's not signing on. She hasn't signed on for 3, 4, or 5 days, and so we were calling the parents, and what we learned was that Jose or Susie wasn't signing on because there was nobody home with them to make them sign on. They were 8 years old, but they had been left home alone because mom couldn't take the day off of work. She would lose her job. Or the other thing that was happening was the internet hotspot is on mom's phone. So when mom went to work, she took the internet with her. So Jose or Susie couldn't sign on to class because there was no internet. So we actually opened up one of our classrooms here and had some of those kids come here and had a staff member just monitoring them. We weren't being teacher, but we were giving them a safe place to be where we were making sure that they were logging on.
Have Wi-Fi.
And have Wi-Fi, right. Having Wi-Fi was a big issue for this community during the pandemic. So, the issues have shifted as COVID has progressed, where initially it was people were just losing their jobs, and then it was affecting the children in a different way.
What did the kids do all day?
I mean, you can only guess, right? I mean, this is, if you're, a latchkey kid and there's nobody home in the afternoon, you're more likely to get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
You're more likely to have bad things happen to you. You're more likely to be out on the street. You're more likely to end up going down a bad path.
Yeah. Anecdotally, have you detected an increase in that kind of thing? I mean, crime rates are bouncing back pretty hard right now. Do you see it?
Crime rates in the city are sky high right now.
Yeah.
And we hear about shootings every week. There's shootings here. There's been murders. There's certainly...
How far away from here physically?
Not far.
Right.
Not far.
Gotcha.
There was a shooting around the corner just about a month ago.
Wow.
So it happens here. It's part of living in an urban environment.
Yeah.
But there's gangs and there's crime, and the children know it.
Yeah. Wow.
The first week that I was working here in 2015, I walked downstairs. The after-school kids had all just gotten here, and somebody ran up to one of the tutors, who at the time was a high school student, and went to drive him home because his mother just called that his father had just been murdered in the street in Paterson. And I remember all of those little kids knew what had happened to their tutor that they admired and, they loved and cared about. His name was Kenny. And they just went on with their day, and it wasn't shocking to them. And I'll give you one other interesting fact. We've all been horrified whenever a school shooting happens in our country, right? And I got the question once, like, well, what are you doing about school shootings in Patterson? Like, do you do lockdowns? Do you do drills? What do you do? And when we talked and how traumatic is that for the kids, right? And when we talked to the teachers and to some of our students, but definitely the teachers that we work with over at Public School Number 2, the story that we heard was that the kids in Patterson don't worry about someone coming into a school to shoot up the school, because why would they come and shoot up random people when the reason you shoot people is because you're mad at them. And if I know I'm mad at someone, I'm just going to go and shoot them. Like that's the world that they've existed in.
There is already an existing logic of murder.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So it's a very different way to grow up, and it's not something you can shake.
Do girls react differently to boys?
Do girls react differently to boys?
No, than boys.
Oh, than
as
boys.
Children to knowledge of shooting and that kind of thing.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a reality for all of our children here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because later on in life, they react differently. Boys tend to be the ones doing the shooting.
Yeah.
Right.
They do.
Yeah. And then for the girls, how does that trauma manifest itself in them?
What we've learned here at Oasis is that many of the girls become mothers at a very young age.
Yeah.
And I don't mean physically mothers. I don't mean that they're getting pregnant. I mean that they have to drop out of our program because mom is working and they have to be home to take care of the little kids and make dinner and make sure they get in bed because mom's second job doesn't allow her to be home during those hours. So our girls tend to take on a high level of responsibility in a chaotic environment at a very young age. And they often don't see that they have a choice of having any other life. So going to college and becoming an insurance broker or an actuarial or engineer isn't something that crosses their mind because they can't leave that home because the family relies on them to be there. We've had children, we had a boy a couple years ago who got accepted to Penn State, and he had scholarships to cover the whole thing, and his parents wouldn't let him go because they needed him at home to help.
What happened to him?
He ended up going to local community college.
Yeah. How long ago was this?
It was about 3 years ago.
So he'd be done now if he stayed?
He would be done now if he stayed, yeah.
He stayed?
Yeah. He did stay. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but he got a 2 years associate's degree, yeah.
Right. God, that's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah, but it happens over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, to see that in a certain kind of sense, like, you can imagine how much talent, right?
Absolutely.
Good for the world is locked up in a place like this, right?
A couple of years ago, we have as I mentioned, we have a teen guidance consultant, and part of her job is to expose kids to different college campuses, even if it's not a college that they're going to go to. Let's just open your mind to the availability out there, right?
Yes.
So a couple of years ago, she took a group of 9 teens into New York City to see FIT. Different than going to William Patterson, local here,
Yeah.
getting on a train.
Very different kind of school.
Getting out of Patterson. Those 9 kids they were all juniors and seniors in high school, had never been on a train before and had never been to New York City.
It's just right there.
It's just right there. You can see it from different parts of Route 80 from here, right? But our worlds here in Patterson are very neighborhood-centric, and they're very small. And if you don't have a car and your job is down the street and your bodega is down the street, why would you go to a bodega in another part of the city, or why would you leave this neighborhood? It's safe. It's ours. Sometimes there's a territorial issue there as well, that we don't want to go into that neighborhood because those aren't our people. But more often than not, it's that this is where we stay. Why would we go anywhere else? So it's broadening our children's minds to what else is out there, not just in terms of colleges and trades, but also what kind of jobs are out there that you've never heard about before. If you ask our kids what they want to be, they'll all say nurses, doctors, firemen, policemen, the things that they see in their everyday life, right? But if you say, you could be a filmmaker, or, you could be a fundraiser, or you could be anything you want, if they don't have exposure to what those opportunities are, they don't have the opportunity to pursue them.
How else do you demonstrate? I mean, listen, I grew up in a small town. I mentioned to you before, I grew up in Canada. It's mostly a farming town, some like manufacturing. It's kind of like a Rust Belt sort of place, right? And parents were teacher, nurse, they're dentists, and that was it. What are you going to be when you grow up? I don't know. I wound up going to university, and it took me a while to kind of figure out. Many other kids who came from larger cities and, less good backgrounds and stuff for them, and they had more exposure to all sorts of different professions. And they knew, like they would show up and they go to university, and they knew what they wanted to be. I want to work at Procter & Gamble in marketing or something like that, right? And I was like, Procter & Gamble, what the heck is that, right? Oh, they make Tide. What? Really? That, and it's just sort of this real deficit of imagination, availability. You mentioned that's a great word for it. I feel like that's something that is kind of cheap, maybe, to provide them, but I mean, so powerful.
Yeah, I think the difference in the scenario that you just described is your mom was a nurse.
Yeah.
Your mom was a nurse, so she went on to higher education.
Completely.
So there was no issue with you going on to higher education.
I just had to know it could, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, you just had to know
where to go,
how to get there.
Yes.
And then once you got there, you had the opportunity for that level of exposure, right? Where many of our kids, mom and dad didn't even graduate high school. If they've emigrated here from another country, sometimes they didn't go past 3rd or 4th grade. So education, looking at education as a way of a means to a better life, isn't their reality. It's not part of their vernacular. It's not something that they talk about around the dinner table. So, mom works at the factory around the corner. That would be a great place for you to work. You could earn $15 an hour, and that would contribute to our rent.
Yes.
That's as big as we get, right?
Yes.
And if you're mired in, sort of the hierarchy of needs, right? We need that money for shelter and food and clothing, right? We can't, if you're mired in the hierarchy of needs, you don't have the bandwidth to think beyond that.
Yep.
So our job here, in addition to being an educational facility, we want to make sure that we provide, all of our moms food to take home, food while they're on site in our soup kitchen, diapers, clothing, wipes, baby food, everything that you need, with the exception of housing at this time for most of our moms, right? But we'll help you find the housing. Everything that you need so that you can focus on your education, so you can dream, those dreams. And I think one of the most interesting things that came out of this super small housing program that we're doing is we just hit the 1 year mark on that, and we asked the moms for their reflections on having a year of not having to pay rent, not having the burden of how am I putting food on the table, really just allowing them the headspace to think about what they want, what kind of mother are they being, what kind of family member are they being, what do they want for their futures. 100% of them said, this is the first time I had peace in my mind and I could think about my own well-being.
Yes.
100% of them. So to the extent that we can do that on a larger scale, even without the housing, that will help breed success.
Yeah, and where my mind was going earlier too on this was, it's almost at every level, just waking them up to the possibility of more can be helpful, right? You mentioned, in their worldview, that two comments you made. One, the local, hyper-local neighborhood, and then two, you can work at some factory, make $15 an hour. That's a big win, right? And that's it, right? Can you, and obviously the resources are a big thing to sort of give them a moment to take a breath and have a look around them. Can you orient them? What are the kinds of things? What's the next thing from that you expose them to that'll allow them to think bigger? What's the first step on that? Is it? I mean, you went to college. Probably many of your staff did, teachers and the like. So they'll see people who went to college before. But is that kind of even too far? Is there something in between? Forget college for a sec. Let's just work on, what would it be?
I think working with the children and having them have that exposure to different people coming in just to volunteer, right? Like just come in and volunteer. Right. Don't come in and tell me this is how you become an engineer.
Yes.
Just come in and volunteer. And, what do you do?
Be a real person.
Be a real person. I'm an engineer. I work, in New York City, and I just had this afternoon to help you with your math homework. And, what's that like? Just little bits of fun exposure. So it's normal, like my kids had, right? Like our next door neighbor was X, the other next door neighbor was Y. Like it's a normal course of, having it become part of their normal is important.
I mean, one of the things that I've gotten to do with this podcast project of mine is to meet some of my intellectual heroes. And you sit across from them, and Jen, they're people. They're people, just like me. And they're not perfect. They'll trip on the way in the door, and they'll say something dumb once in a while, and that's okay, right? Because everybody's people. And it really kind of like, as a person with enough privilege to be able to sit back and reflect once in a while, I think, that's it. Like that's not that hard. I mean, if there are, obviously you don't want to, some people, achieve amazing things, and you got to pay respect to that. But the difference between kind of somebody who does and doesn't do it oftentimes is just thinking that you can. Right?
And a lot of it's luck too. I mean, the children that come to Oasis are living in poverty because they were born and they live in this zip code, as opposed to a zip code 10 miles away, where those kids have the opportunity to go to an Ivy League school if they really want to,
yeah.
Right? And a lot of it is chance. It's left up to chance and who you're who's in your circle, right?
Yeah.
So if the right people are in your circle, whether it's in Wyckoff, New Jersey, or Paterson, New Jersey, you can dream and you can achieve. And so I think we're trying to put the right people in the circles here.
So chance kind of introduces another topic area which I'm interested in, which is catastrophic occurrences here, right? So I'm from the insurance industry. This is something we think about a lot, and something I think you think about a fair bit here too. So COVID's an example. There are probably other examples. What are they? What are some things that take everybody by surprise here that really set folks back, and what do you do?
Fire. Fire is a big issue in poor urban areas, and it happens quite frequently. So there will be a fire in the city, and I will get a text message from our COO that there are 78 people displaced, 24 people displaced. We had a fire during COVID, actually, right across the street, and there were 8 families in there that we knew, and they were part of our Oasis family, and many of them ended up moving out of state because they couldn't find affordable housing here. They lost everything. Some of them weren't documented, so they had it even harder because they weren't eligible for some benefits. But several of them ended up moving out of state where they had family members who could take them in until they could figure out what their next steps were. So fire is a big one. Flood is a big one. Natural disasters in Patterson. Flood. We're on the Passaic River. We've got a lot of illegal basement apartments in Patterson. We had some people die in the last
Really?
Hurricane Ida. Yeah, there were many people who were flooded out of their apartments. It was quite tragic. I think that was the beginning of September, and it actually delayed school opening for a week here.
Yes. What do you do to help? Can you do something? Is there something you can do to help folks?
Yeah, so I'll give you, when we had the fire across the street, we all came down here at 6 a.m. We cooked breakfast. We had it out on the street for everybody. We brought everyone into our soup kitchen here. We provided them with clothing. We had the Red Cross come in to our facility to help them. So we have 3 social workers and a family navigator on site, and they will sit with anyone who's in need of anything and help them find the resources. And if there are quite often resources that we can't provide for, but we will make that link for you, and we will help you, find your way.
How do you get I mean, I guess if it's across the street, that's, they'll know they can come here probably. Farther away, harder for them to realize. I mean, how do you get the word into them to come here?
Yeah, it's funny because every year we do like this, big survey, like, how did you find out about Oasis?
Yeah.
And more often than not, it's by word of mouth.
Yeah.
People in this community in particular, I guess in every community, right? Like if you need a plumber, you're going to call a friend and say, who's your plumber?
Wow.
Like I'm in need of help. Who do I go to? You're going to trust your friends or your family members to tell you. So it really is word of mouth.
Do you have a sense for how much kind of awareness coverage you have in Patterson? Like, I guess the farther away physically you get from here, probably it diminishes. How do you think about that? Is there parts of the town which nobody ever comes from to here?
No, we've people come from all 6 wards in Patterson,
Okay.
and I think we're fairly well known. I mean, if we have, like I said, we have 3 social workers and a family navigator, we could quadruple that, and we wouldn't still have enough
Wow.
to service the women and children who come to us who have deep needs.
Right. And so, in what way does that resource constraint kind of manifest itself right now? So, you said you could do 4x what you're doing. So that means 75% of the people that could be helped aren't. Do you turn them away?
We don't turn them away. We just work really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, Jenny, one of our social workers the other day, told me she had 56 messages on her phone. It's all people who are calling because they might just need diapers, right?
Yeah.
They might need just diapers, but they might be in a domestic violence situation and they need a safety plan and they need to create a pathway out. So it really runs the gamut.
And there must be some point at which are you just not able to get to all those voicemail messages every day or something? I mean, how does the system just creak anywhere?
No, we bring in we work with interns. We have interns help. We will bring in other staff members. We will never turn a woman and child away.
How do you determine kind of what additional? Because this is a funny thing, right? So if you say there's this the service you're doing now, you could do more, but then you're also at the same time adding things, changing things. How do you make that kind of decision with the resources, with the money, with the people's time, which is a big one, the volunteers, maybe a bigger resource than the money. How do you allocate that, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing struggle, to be truthful. We always listen to the community. So I use the example of the citizenship program. We're about to launch something called the Mommy Series to help pregnant moms who are lacking resources in this community. We've experienced a lot of growth over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
A tremendous amount of growth, both physically with our construction project here, where we've added nearly 10,000 square feet to our facility, but we've also we've almost doubled our budget in size, and we've increased our staff quite a bit. So we have growing pains, as you would well expect, but we've had the great experience of having our stakeholders really respond. So we've been able to continue to grow the programs. We've always had a waiting list for our ESL program. And so this year, funding allowed us to hire an additional ESL teacher so that we could help fulfill that need. So we're always trying to meet that need and balance strategic growth.
Is there some kind of deeper thing that you would love to work on? So I actually think of, you mentioned that the history of this organization is a soup kitchen, right? And then you recognized, well, the people here, they really do need to have more services that would help them even more. I mean, the ESL program, the education, that's incredible, right? So you're operating at kind of like a higher level of need there, but it's more like the give a person a fish or teach them to fish kind of thing, right? So now you're kind of teaching them to fish. And then we've talked in this conversation about aspiring to learn to fish, right? You can fish. We can all fish. Here's how you do it, right? And that they realize or acknowledge that they can, then they're willing to learn it now. Whereas you could have told them that and they would have ignored the instruction and then just sort of, had a problem until somebody gave them some fish. Is there some other level to that? Like, is there something else? I'm thinking maybe in terms of the community generally here in Patterson. Is there a deeper level or higher level, I'm not sure how you think about it, that you could work at, which would kind of accelerate all of the development here?
Yeah, we work really hard on trying not to duplicate the efforts of other organizations.
Okay, right.
So working more closely and more collaboratively with organizations that might be doing, say, having a greater effort on workplace training, right? Specific workplace training. So Patterson Task Force does a wait staff training and a serve safe training. And so sharing those resources, I think, is really where the focus lies in terms of helping our families realize success more quickly or more effectively. I think the way we have to go, and I'm not saying Oasis, but the way we as a society has to go, is giving these families safe, supportive housing. I think that's the major stumbling block to people being able to realize, having a beautiful life is possible.
What would that look like?
So it's interesting. We're working with some people sort of on the state level as part of a collaborative here in Patterson that's was initiated by the Health Coalition of Passaic County and Habitat for Humanity here in Patterson. And they've brought together, I guess, about 12 partners. It's a program called Building Healthy, More Equitable Communities out of Robert Wood Johnson and the Reinvestment Fund are kind of spearheading it. And it's happening in 4 cities, one of them being Patterson. And so we've spent a year actually imagining what this would look like. And what it would look like would be identified programs embedded in a housing facility with a distinct population, a defined population, whether that's veterans or adults with disabilities or single moms or nuclear families, whatever that might be. But a defined population with resources embedded in the housing model to meet the needs of that population. So the model that we've come up with for this initiative, and we've gotten so far as we're actually looking for properties to talk about potential development. The model that we've come up with is a 14-unit structure for single moms with daycare and perhaps a social worker and some programmatic components that the partner agencies would bring to the table. But having that and making it affordable. So what's affordable? Affordable means you're not spending more than 50% on your rent. But also developing a program that's a pathway to where you want to be.
Yes.
So just because you're living in this Beck initiative doesn't mean that's where you're going to stay forever.
Yes.
So maybe there's a component of a housing model next door that Habitat does. That's you're going to aspire to become a Habitat homeowner, right? Or maybe it's identifying that you want to go move to the suburbs and be in a more rural setting. But whatever that pathway is and whatever your goals are identified, and you've got someone supporting you and working with you towards that goal, right?
It's what's interesting about that is housing is a reference to a physical structure, right? It's a house is a thing, or an apartment building's a thing, but the problem with a place like Patterson isn't that the houses, it will be one problem if the structures are probably not great. They're on fire anyway, but that the people inside, right? It's a cultural problem, it's a social problem, or there are many social problems. And so what's interesting about your plan there is you're actually kind of reconfiguring the social side of things by having these identified groups. Yeah. Did we tell me more about that? Like, how do you think about rebooting the cultural context for somebody? Because we were talking earlier about the deadbeat boyfriend shows up with a bad attitude and starts messing with this environment. You're piloting the program here. What are some other things that you want to do to kind of insulate or nurture this kind of rebooted culture?
Yeah, it's really about building community.
Yeah.
And as we talked about before, it's really about having the people involved in the community build the community.
Yep.
So again, not being patriarchal about it, but what do you want to see in this community? What are your needs? How can the needs be addressed? Because you're right, a lot of our families live in homes and neighborhoods that aren't safe. The walls might be painted and the ceiling might not leak, but you step outside of those doors and it's not safe. So how do we create a community that's going to ensure its own safety? So there's going to be, rules, but there's going to be self-monitoring, and there's going to be opportunities for people to form bonds that will create a supportive environment. That's really what the model is.
And so you're selecting, or folks are selecting themselves into this environment, and they're leaving an environment. What happens to the environment they leave? It's going to get worse, I suppose. What do you think about that?
Well, please God, no.
Yeah.
We certainly hope not. I think there's a lot of reason to hope that Patterson is on the upswing. We do see Some great things happening in Patterson. I mean, if you go to the Great Falls now, it's a national park, and there's a educational center, and there's a little amphitheater there. Like you can walk around that park and feel safe, and it's beautiful. And they're rebuilding Hinchcliffe Stadium, which was, the first Negro baseball stadium in the country. And there is some great housing programs going on in the city. But the city is still a dangerous place. So as you move people out, it's probably going to be a churn, right? There's going to be people who move there who will need to be moved out as well.
Right.
Right? But we hope that we're on the upswing.
Right. So we're out of time. How can people help?
Yeah. So obviously we're 97% privately funded, which gives us a lot of flexibility, which is great.
Yeah.
Our website is www.oasisnj.org. And there's all sorts of ways to make financial contributions on there, but there's also a lot of ways to find out how to volunteer, how to get more involved in our programs. So that's the primary resource. But we invite anyone to come in for a tour, see our work, because it's one thing to hear about it, but you walk through our halls when our kids are here, our moms are here, and you kind of feel the support and the love that happens here every day. It's a little bit miraculous.
My guest today is Jen Brady, Director of Oasis. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.